me from here on in. Today we're talking to the two Steves, Steve Ciobo for the government and Stephen Jones for the Labor Party. Let's put beauty before age and talk to Steve Ciobo first. He joins me live from Canberra. Thanks very much for being there.
One of the most complimentary
it's all downhill from
I've had,
it's all downhill from here, Steve Ciobo. All right, let me start by asking you a really simple question. How can any private organisation, business entity or the like be so dysfunctional, so incompetent, that for years it can be getting ripped off millions of dollars and not even know about it?
Well, look, I don't profess to be an expert on what's happened with the Victorian Liberal Party, Peter. I have, of course, seen media reports, and from the media reports it would appear that there were some fraudulent invoices involved, and obviously that's not a straightforward fraud. If you've got a fraudulent invoice, then obviously you need to penetrate behind that. But you know, as Michael Kroger, I saw in reports today, remarked, it's been happening for too long, and so it's appropriate that it's been found. I think that's the most important thing. And now, of course, whoever's responsible, and obviously allegations are being made, but whoever's responsible will no doubt be prosecuted.
Are you concerned, though, again, we have to stress that these are just allegations at this point in time, but if they're substantiated, are you concerned about what has been reported in the Herald Sun, which is that the gentleman involved may have had misuses, or at least paying back inappropriate uses on a corporate credit card when in Tasmania in the division, and then subsequent to that, with that known to have been recommended to the Victorian division of the party despite that? I mean, given what's ended up happening, does something deeper have to be investigated here about who's recommending who for what jobs, given what may have been known about this individual?
Well, look, I mean, we've got to be careful that we're not sort of flying off with too many, very thin threads here, Peter, frankly. I think what's important is that this behaviour, in terms of the allegations that have been made, has been found. I think what's appropriate now is that a comprehensive investigation take place and that prosecutions arise from it if deemed appropriate. I mean, what might have happened in previous divisions, there's a lot of speculation around. I just think we should cut through that. There's now professionals involved, professional investigators, officers. That's what matters, and I'm not going to get too tied up in what if scenarios. I think we just focus on the fact it would appear the allegations against Mr Mantak are quite serious, obviously, and that it be prosecuted.
Can we conclude though by saying this, that just optically for the government at a time where it's trying to prosecute wrongdoings in the union movement, it's not a good look to have such a significant financial alleged wrongdoing within the very foundations of the Liberal Party?
No, I'm not going to agree with that, Peter. And the reason I'm not going to agree with it is because we're talking about two very different things here. I mean, the allegations, if they're proven to be correct, is the work of one fraudster doing the wrong thing. That's an entirely different situation to what the Royal Commission has been uncovering, which is cultural problems within the union movement. There's some allegations in terms of these $40,000 deals that were done under the table that went to Bill Shorten as Leader of the Opposition for his campaign. There's, of course, the allegations made about the tie-ups between the union movement broadly and organised criminal gangs. So that's a very different situation to one particular individual who allegedly has done something wrong.
Yep, no, I think that's a fair point, but I had to ask the question. All right, let's move on to the free trade agreement. I was talking very briefly to Julie Bishop, the Foreign Minister, about this before the ad break. The Labor Party and the unions have some concerns about this. Would this have been avoidable, their concerns I mean, had there been more transparency around the free trade agreement earlier than there ultimately was? There was a long lag period between it being signed versus the details going public.
No, I don't think it would have made any difference at all. The fact is, Peter, what's actually driving this agenda by the trade union movement and the Labor Party is the trade union movement. As we know, the trade union masters are the ones who control the strings for the Labor Party, which are the puppets in the Parliament for the trade union movement. This is all about the union movement doing everything they can to scare Australians into the belief, and I should highlight a mistaken belief because it's not actually based in fact, into the mistaken belief that Australian jobs jobs are going to be lost to the expense of foreign workers. It's completely false. It has no basis whatsoever. And all we see happening is that the Labor Party, in particular Bill Shorten and Penny Wong, are prosecuting the argument on behalf of their union masters because they're the ones who control the donations to the Labor Party. They're the ones that control the pre-selections for the Labor Party. They're the ones who are going to fund a massive union spending campaign against the coalition. So, of course, the Labor Party parliamentarians, in particular Penny Wong and Bill Shorten, are going to dance to whichever beat is played by the union.
But is this a problem on both sides of the parliament, that the public just doesn't know who to believe anymore necessarily? On the one hand, you do have a scare campaign, which when we talk to people like Professor Richard Holden, who's an economist at UNSW, he says that on his read of the free trade agreement, it is pretty much what you're saying. It's nothing more than a Labor and union beat up. So you've got that sort of evidence there. But then equally in Parliament, we see your side of politics around the Adani jobs at risk because of the environmental problems there in terms of court cases and the like. Your side says it's 10,000 jobs, but the court papers themselves say it's more like 1,500 jobs. It feels like both sides of politics try to sort of, in a sense, gild the lily when providing information to support their argument.
Well, Peter, I think the legal term for it is puffery in an advertising sense, but look,
you acknowledge that it happens?
Rightly or wrongly. Look, I think, of course, I'm not going to sit here and say to you that members of Parliament don't necessarily sometimes pick on a worst or best case scenario and highlight that. Of course that happens. Members of Parliament, of course that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they don't from time to time. But on this China FTA, don't you find it curious that the only ones who are really making the allegation that the FTA is going to be bad for Australian workers, the only ones tipping millions of dollars into a campaign against the FTA is the union movement, and the people that prosecuted on behalf of the union movement are Bill Shorten, Tanya Plibersek, Penny Wong and other Labor members of Parliament. And yet, when you get former Labor members of Parliament, for example today, Bob Carr, the former Labor Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Crean, the former Trade Minister under a Labor government, these guys come out and say, you know what, the coalition's right, the Labor Party and the union's concerns about Australian jobs being sacrificed for foreign workers simply cannot be sustained. I mean, is that really a coincidence that they happen to be former Labor ministers and not current Labor ministers, and yet they're more at liberty to speak the truth?
I look forward to getting you on, Stephen Ciobo, when you're a former minister once you've been promoted into the ministerial ranks, which won't be long from now. Maybe we'll get greater openness and transparency on your thoughts on all issues. Who knows? Let me ask you this, though. There are a lot of leaks coming out of Cabinet. Leaks from the party room, I don't think much of. There's more than 100 people in there. I'd be more surprised if it didn't leak. But leaks out of Cabinet, that's got to be concerning. I mean, you must sit there as somebody watching the Cabinet process from a slight distance and just wonder how people can be prepared to leak in such important circumstances and only do damage to the government as a consequence.
Look, of course, there's a great sense of frustration among all coalition members that there are clearly some people leaking from Cabinet. The Prime Minister himself is frustrated with the leaks from Cabinet. So I think anybody in that situation, and it's not unique to the coalition. We've seen previously Labor Cabinets leak as well. I mean, it is very frustrating. It ought to stop. But fundamentally, as frustrating as it is, we still remain steadfastly focused on the job that we were elected to do, on the task that the Australian people challenged us to undertake on their behalf as a government, and that of course is to restore the nation's finances, to get economic growth going again and to focus on securing jobs for Australians.
All right, Stephen Ciobo, appreciate you joining us on To The Point. Next time you're on, we will have the two of us to grill you, Christina Kenneally and myself. Thanks for your time.